Hey guys, Chef Bear here, coming at you live again from my kitchen. It's Tuesday. You know what that means? It's time for another Teaching Tuesday. And today we're talking all about ground beef and ways that you could stretch your grocery dollar to go further and further. Let's be honest, proteins are expensive. The price of ground beef has gone up and up and up. I remember when I was a kid, now I'm aging myself, where ground beef was $1.29 a pound. Now, during my most recent excursion out to Jewel, our big grocery store here in Chicago, we were pushing at almost $5 a pound, and that's not the organic grass-fed. I mean, it's just standard regular beef. Talk about expensive. While I love meat, I can't afford to do a roast or a big production every night of the week. So ground beef literally becomes one of my saving graces. I lean into ground beef when I'm looking for a budget-friendly way to cook a delicious meal that's going to feed me for a day or 2 days. Now, I'll be honest, I love to make meatballs. I love to make meatloaf or even a quick spaghetti bolognese. And for about $5. Now, granted, that's the price here in Chicago. Hopefully, wherever you guys are at, the price of beef is a little bit less expensive. But for about $5, you can pick up a pound of ground beef, and you can come up with some pretty creative recipes. Now, in the resource section underneath this video, I'm going to share with you some of my favorite recipes. I have 2 meatball recipes plus a chili recipe that we're going to demo today that make excellent use of ground beef. Now, if you don't eat beef, feel free to swap out for ground turkey, ground pork, ground chicken. Now, if you're using pork, chicken, or turkey, add a little bit of extra fat in there because the ground beef is usually 80-20, 80% meat, 20% fat. Your chicken and your turkey is going to be a little bit drier. You're going to want that touch of oil. So in the recipe sections, in the resource section rather, you're going to find that I have a recipe for Greek style meatballs or German style meatballs. Both of these are paired with buttery noodles. But I found other tips. If I add extra milk, breadcrumbs, vegetables, I can take that meatball recipe. That's enough for one meal. Comfortably will serve 4. If I add an extra $1 or $2 of ingredients, milk, breadcrumbs, even chopped spinach, literally you can take that meatball recipe and make a huge meatloaf recipe. And that's going to feed you for 2 or 3 days. Or if you're a single guy like myself, going to feed you all week. Now, speaking of meatloaf, you might be wondering what binders and fillers you could add to a pound of meat to make it stretch out even further. Meatloaf, you think breadcrumbs, but just don't think breadcrumbs. What about rice? What about quick oats? What about quinoa or couscous? If you have any leftover grain, if it's cooked, it will fold into your meat just fine. But if it's not cooked, you want to make sure that there's enough liquid in the meat to actually plump it up. That's where quick oats, us being from the Midwest, that's a staple. Growing up, it was quick oats in the meatloaf that made it meatloaf. So another tip that I love, and I've already kind of hinted about this, is the addition of sneaky veg. Today in the chili recipe, I'm actually going to add some chopped spinach that I had that was going south. I overbought on spinach at the grocery store last week because I was overzealous thinking I was going to eat a salad every day of the week. Obviously that didn't happen. So I had some spinach that was going to go south, but I was hungry for chili, so I got the brilliant idea. Let's blitz the spinach, let's add it to the chili recipe. That's going to make that chili go even further and bump up that nutrition level. But when you're making meatballs or a meatloaf and you're using ground beef and trying to stretch it a little bit further, sneaky vegetables are a great way to do it. You could use spinach, carrots, onions, celery. Now, you want to make sure that anytime you're using these sneaky vegetables, especially if you're cooking for kids, you want to blitz them in the food pro so they're as small as possible. That way they fold into the mixture and nobody's the wiser. Especially, or if you're like me, you may not always like vegetables. You could trick yourself into thinking that you're having a delicious piece of meatloaf and forget that there's an extra dose of vegetables or two in there. So today I'm going to demo one of my favorite multi-cooker chili recipes. Literally, this recipe is based off that favorite fast food chili. Begins with a W, ends with an S. Square hamburgers. Would you like to buy a female name? This chili recipe is based off of what I had there. I've amped up the flavor a little bit, and I'm adding a lot more beans and vegetables to the mixture. That way I can make sure it lasts more than one meal. Literally, I'm going to be making enough to last me all week. So this recipe in its original form, which is very much like the Wendy's chili recipe, will be included in the recipe packet for this Teaching Tuesday. If you want to know how I made this recipe for something that Chef Bear wants to eat, send me a DM, send me a ping, send me a note, send me smoke signals, and I will get you that recipe because I know you guys are going to love either one of them. All right, so what I'm going to do, first things first, is I'm going to fire up the multi-cooker on the brown and saute mode, and I'm going to brown up the ground beef. And then I'll walk you through some of the other vegetable and additives we're adding to the chili to make it delicious. If I could remember how to use my own multi-cooker, that would be good. So I got some ground beef. And to the ground beef, once this comes up to temperature, I have 2 cloves of garlic, salt, pepper, a good amount of oregano, 2 tablespoons of unprocessed cocoa, the unsweetened cocoa. Believe it or not, it adds some complexity. And when you're doing a very simple chili, any way that you could boost up that flavor easily, you want to do. And then I have about 2 or 3 tablespoons of my robust chili powder. If you remember last Teaching Tuesday, I included a recipe on this robust chili powder. I'll include it again on this packet in case you missed it last week. All right, so the ground beef, I'm going to wait for that to come up to temperature. Then I'm going to season it with all the seasonings. I have about 5 ounces of chopped spinach that I blitzed in the food pro. That once I season the ground beef, I'll add that in. Then here I have half a large red onion, a can of kidney beans, a can of pinto beans, a can of black beans, and what else did I add in there? I'm trying to remember. I think that's and also 2 large bell peppers, because I had 2 bell peppers that were going to go south as well. For the liquid, I have a glass of beer. My mini keg was about ready to die. I was finishing off one of those bottles, so I finished it off here and added just a little bit of water. The beer will help temper the heat if there's too much spice in here for you. And then I have a 15-ounce can of chili with tomatoes, which we're going to keep all the liquid. All right, so the ground beef is ready to season up now.
Now, Robert, you had canned beans, and we make sure we always rinse those, correct?
Yes, so canned beans. I love canned beans for fast, quick meals. But you definitely want to make sure that you rinse them in your strainer because they're covered in citric acid and preservatives, and it's just not very tasty. When you open a can of beans and you see that thick liquid, that's not what you want to be eating. Now, if you have time using your multi-cooker or even the stove to make beans from scratch, more power to you. Definitely Chef Bear approved. But for this fast and easy meal, I'm using canned beans. And for a weeknight meal, I have to be honest, I would use canned beans every time. All right, so the ground beef is starting to come together. I'm going to fold in the spinach. And I wish you guys had smell-o-vision, because even just the addition of the spinach with a little bit of the garlic and the ground beef, it's starting to smell good. It's starting to smell like chili. All right, I'm going to give this a couple minutes. So now, while we're waiting for this ground beef to render out some of the fat, that way we can saute the vegetables and add the liquid and get it cooking. Let's talk about the orange print. How many of you guys went through my free course that I hosted last month for the orange print, a pathway to kitchen success? If you haven't, shoot me a note. I'm going to be filming a video where my orange print was a 5-day series of lives that I did on Facebook that literally walked people through how to plan, prep, and prepare meals in under 45 minutes. It's the methodology I use every week. And what I want to do is I want to show you guys how you can be successful in the kitchen. And if you're not familiar with the orange print, I want to send you the PDF. And I also want to get you in my list. That way when I get the new video series, which I'm going to be working on this month, I want to get that over to you guys where you could review it and you can glean kitchen wisdom. That way I'm setting you up for success to be successful in the kitchen. All right, so the meat has started to render. I'm going to add the vegetables. Now granted, there's a ton of vegetables in here. Oh, I also added 2 serrano peppers, just for giggles, for a little bit of spice. So that's another thing. If you're really looking to stretch that pound of ground beef, don't skip on the veg. For example, this chili, when you get it at Wendy's, it only has kidney beans. But I added pinto and I added black bean to stretch it even further. You know, there's no shame in that vegetable game. So then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add the canned tomatoes and my beer. Now, if you don't want to add the beer, use chicken stock, use water, use vegetable stock, use whatever you happen to have on hand. The beer just helps cut down some of that spice and adds a little bit of a complex flavor. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cook this under high pressure for about 15 minutes and let it do a natural release. Now, I'm not going to keep you guys here for that long. This is where I'm going to say adios, my friends. I will see you next Tuesday, where we're going to be talking about the goodness of making our own chicken stock. That's a lesson you do not want to miss, because that is one of my kitchen go-tos, is chicken stock. And if I can teach you how to make your own, preservative-free, easier, cheaper than opening a box, I've done my job as a chef. I'll see you guys next Tuesday. Make sure to check out the resource section, shoot me a message, and I will get you all the recipes and the notes from this session. All right, guys, it's been great. See you next Tuesday.